But surprisingly, it's still the one that people use.
That's a great investment, John, to be able to display in real time and say, hey, this is what you got. This is what you do with it to not sound terrible.
I got mics on mics on mics. If you've watched the show before, you've seen my various props. I'm always bringing these things up.
I just bought an ATR 2100X.
There you go. The last thing I was going to add, Dave, is I think this is a really good kind of lean into something that could further engagement with the audience, is having them submit these 3 up, 3 down questions. So maybe they don't necessarily, it doesn't sound like they necessarily have to be guest specific. They could just be like you said, who would your favorite president at their athletic peak be, on your starting pitcher or whatever. Just having them submit as many questions. I think that's a good way to get people involved too.
That's a great tip. We should do that. We will.
All right, we'll move to another clip. Which clip shall we move to? Who wants to step forward?
We can do mine.
Okay, we will do yours.
Okay.
And for edification, we're going to do. You suggested the video and playing the first 2 minutes of it.
So we will do the long video, just the first couple minutes, and then we'll do the short video, which is only about a minute. So background on this is something that we changed on this show over the past year. So I think we bring this up a lot on this show is, why are we always stacking our ads at the front of the show? It's going to kill retention on the show. People are going to skip right through it. People don't care. If anything, for new listeners, it's going to turn them off. They're going to go, when does this actual show even start? So this show is called the Car Dealership Guy Podcast. I'm the producer on this show. You won't hear my voice at all. I don't create. In the first one, you'll see I created this entire video for the first one. Thank God the show has grown so much that they've hired a video person. I am simply just the full podcast producer on the back end. I'm putting it all together after it's all done. So the first video that we're going to watch is how we used to do our intros, where you'll see all the ads in the front and you'll feel how it kind of just drags on. And then you will see the new version that we're using now to increase viewer retention, specifically on YouTube, where it is much more condensed.
We see in our data that affordability is the number one issue facing consumers. The price of vehicles is also grown astronomically. So you've got higher cost goods, higher interest rates, but yet you're also seeing a pretty healthy market right now. Consumers have shown us that they're not, saving for the future. They're more living in the present moment, and they're still spending on vehicles, taking vacations. And this has been a strange time in the economy for sure.
What's up, everyone? This is Car Dealership Guy. You're listening to the Car Dealership Guy podcast, which is my effort to give you access to the most unbiased and transparent insights into the car market. Let's get into today's episode. Alex Vetter, CEO of Cars Commerce, a technology company that's empowering dealerships with the tools to simplify everything about car buying and selling. You may be wondering, is Cars Commerce related to Cars.com? The short answer is yes. I asked Alex about that on the episode, and he explained exactly why they recently rebranded into Cars Commerce. In this conversation, we discussed how car buying is evolving, how Alex acquires other companies and what he looks for in founders, solving for the software fatigue epidemic, the future of the dealership showroom, predictions for the car market, and is online car sales here to stay or will it go away? But before we get into the show, I'd like to thank Cars Commerce for coming on as a guest and also sponsoring this episode. I talk a lot on this podcast about how complicated and disconnected our industry can be with so many different moving parts. So as a Cars.com and Dealer Inspire customer myself of many years, I was excited to hear Alex Vetter announce his team's vision to simplify dealership technology as Cars Commerce. If you missed it, they've been connecting the most valuable audience from their Cars.com marketplace with innovative technology and media solutions such as Dealer Inspire, AccuTrade, and their newly formed Cars Commerce Media Network. So now this platform means you can work with one partner to advertise to consumers you know are in the market, guide them through a seamless customer experience from online to in-store, and quickly build a differentiated reputation in your market. Simple. That's what we need to improve the customer experience and future-proof local retailers. Go to carscommerce.inc or visit the link in the show notes below to see how you can simplify your business and grow profitability.
So there you see, there's the full ad. You can tell that there's a very long clip at the beginning, a very long description of what's discussed in the episode, a very long description of the guest's background, and then a very long ad in there. By the end, you're kind of like, is there even a conversation coming up? And so all of this data and feedback from the audience comes together, and you'll see now what is the more condensed version of how we kick off an episode of the podcast.
I tell the sales staff, I tell all our employees, you have a unique platform. You are in and of yourself. The way that you influence the people around you, it's all unique to yourself. And we need to use that. You need to use that for your business. The sales side of the car business, I've always thought that the advertising that the dealership does, it helps sell the first car. Then a good experience with a good salesman, you sell cars 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8. And so I think social media does that, but it's an amplifier.
Today, I'm excited to speak with Ryan Rohrman, CEO of Rohrman Auto Group and third-generation owner of the 23-store Midwest outfit who turned his traditional dealer group into a TikTok famous powerhouse. We discuss how he's tackling dealership marketing and leveraging data to sell more cars and improve the car shopping experience. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: Cars Commerce, TransUnion, and CDK Global. And now let's get into the show.
And then obviously the episode would start there. And then a couple notes on that one specifically. We had to piece together some audio on the back end because our host was on vacation. So you'll hear that kind of jump between the sponsored notes. But you'll see there's captions now. There's a bunch of movement happening on the video side versus just the talking head with the voice kind of waves happening in the background. We've pivoted away from all of that. It's a lot more interactive for the audience because they're gearing more towards YouTube. But you can see you got all that information condensed down in a much quicker time period, and you're still getting the same amount of info, and we're getting to the episode faster.
Whose idea was this to shorten everything?
Collaboration, everybody's. Mostly it was the audience feedback. The audience was saying like, well, actually not even necessarily the audience saying it. It was showing it in the analytics. People were dropping off really quickly in the beginning of the episode. So it starts off, 100% of people are watching, and then it drop. And then as you've shortened it, that number stays much higher because people are more engaged. Again, the visual flashing, changing of images, a lot of that has really paid off. And it's helpful on the audio side as well. Obviously, the audio side is much more dominant than the video side in terms of numbers. So getting to the episode faster without having the person who's listening, because they're probably driving, doing chores, they're away from their phone. They don't have to stop what they're doing to skip through 2 minutes of ads. They can know that within a minute, they're going to get into the episode. Then the sponsors are knowing our name is still hitting the audience's ears, and then we're pulling those full 30-second ads and we're putting those displays throughout the episode. So there's a mid-roll, a near mid-roll, and then a post-roll.
It's like night and day. I might have spaced out when you were setting up the clip, but because I didn't realize you were showing us before and after. And as I'm watching the first one, first of all, the graphics are terrific, and I want to know what app. Is there an app you use to make the cartoon guy talk?
That was oh no, I didn't even do that. That was the producer before me, so he created all of that. And when I got hired to come onto the show, I was like, by the way, I can't do any of that. So that was a stock intro of introducing the show.
Yours is the second one.
No, I don't have. I put together the entirety of the second one. What I was responsible for on the first one was pulling the front clip, putting the ads together, and then creating that wave form thing, and then obviously all the audio.
Like, just take credit for all of it. It's night and day. It was, as I'm watching that first, and I was like about 2/3 into it, I'm like, I would have switched off. Or we live in a skip intro culture now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody expects the ability to skip through, and I wonder if there's going to be backlash at some point, because a lot of great pods I listen to have 3 minutes of ads at the beginning of the show, and I just, do people not know how to use the skip forward button? I mean, anyway, but with the second one, I wouldn't have used it because it mixed up the variety of images and everything. It moved fast, and it set the episode up nicely. So kudos.
And I know, Johnny, you and I have talked offline about just the fact that we've noticed in podcasts that we are fans of is that the cold open is becoming more and more popular. So I know some very prominent podcasts that have huge, very dedicated audiences. They're just going straight into the good stuff right away. And they're foregoing a lot of the just the intro. That's falling off, that people are getting to the content right away. And I have to say, I find it to be very, because you get you get they get their hooks into you. And so I'm willing to stay through those ads that come down and as mid rolls or mid rolls, whatever, if you're getting to the good stuff right away. So I personally see that as the way a lot of podcasts are going.
I concur. Mid rolls are more powerful than just sort of coming out of the gate with something. Unlike radio where they have data immediately to show that something went too long or the ad break is, or the bit is long and boring and people drop off, they have that data and you don't get it. And if you're still doing the same thing that you were doing a year ago and you're not paying attention to your analytics and you're finding your downloads are flat, this is why your downloads are flat or dropping, is because you have not evolved the show forward with a fresh approach. Can you make it shorter? I know, for instance, I've got a clip coming up that I'm going to play, and I think I could have gone 3 minutes, but I managed to get everything I needed down and cut it into about a minute and a half. And I was talking with Tony Garcia from Now Networks, which is the home of the Bob and Cherry Show and a bunch of other radio syndication. And I said, my promo is 37 seconds. And Tony's a former program director from radio and turned to me and said, if you can make it 37, you can make it 30. And if you can make it 30, you can make it 27. So whatever you think that you're doing that is yay long, you can make it shorter.
Mm.
That's the old adage of have it.
But I wonder if we'll eventually get to a point where we just ditch those intros altogether and it's literally just starting with the conversation. And then, 2 minutes in, it's just a quick cut to, by the way, this episode is brought to you by X, Y, and Z company. And then we're hitting the near mid roll, the mid roll, and then the post roll to where it's just, but I agree with the hook. Cause I think I look at that intro and I wonder if that alone, that whole intro could just be a TikTok or a short to promote the episode and then have the actual episode just be the conversation. But again, with these business podcasts like this, the audience is going to want some background on who this is. Not every person that we're bringing on is this super well-known name where everybody knows who they are. There has to be some kind of setup.
Well, some people do what you just described. Was it you, John, or you, Catherine? Not so much a cold open, but there are these rolling opens where it's like, oh, you hear people chatting. Oh, yeah, got here about 3:30. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So, how you doing today? Good. And then the guest sometimes will say, "Are we recording?" And the host says, "Yeah, this is the show." And so it's a little inelegant, but it pulls you in. Like when you hit the podcast, you're like, did I just jump in the middle or something? And it might be a moment of confusion, but that is another way of getting you into the conversation.
Will you indulge me a quick sidebar, a tangential sidebar to this, to Johnny's samples here? One thing that popped out to me is that these Cars Commerce has a media network now. So this is telling me that a big, that was one of the things that was promoted in the longer the video that you played at the beginning, the first one that we watched. So that's telling me that this is a car company that's understanding the value of having their own media network that is putting out not just social media content, I'm guessing, but sponsoring this show, probably going to be rolling out other things. So that for the branded content world, that seems like a plus sign, a positive indicator.
Catherine, you sound like somebody who just listened to the episode with Steve Pratt.
I know. I learned.
Yeah.
I paid attention. Aren't you proud of me, Matt?
Yeah. So, shameless plug, Steve Pratt, who was at Pacific Content and did branded podcasts, discovered that there were companies like Cars Commerce that were getting in and creating their own media companies inside their own companies, which is how he came up with branded podcasts, which is how we're all here today doing what we do.
Right.
I'll throw in one more thing just about the you called it a pre-mid roll, Catherine, which I really like, and the value of it. And David, you already pointed out, I think we're going to get away from this, or Johnny, we're going to get away from this conversation or from the ads at the very beginning. I think we may already be there. So quick idea for anybody who has a show and you want to do 2 mid rolls. Make the first one yours, where your voice as the host, as the brand, comes on for a call to action. Go ahead and make the second one a programmatic one if you want. It's pretty neat, right? Because the attention, if you get a programmatic spot right off the top, it's like, oh, look, ads, forward. But if you get the host talking right away, the engagement is there. So any call to action is going to be quite valuable.
Your radio side is showing, Matt, start the ad break with the live read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I just, remembered it last week and thought I'll start doing it now again. Which I guess segues into the clip I'm bringing, because I think this is what gets said here. So I'm going to bring a piece of the New Media Show. This is a podcast hosted by Todd Cochran and Rob Greenlee. And they had Adam Curry on their show last week. And
Big get.
yeah, it was a very, very good get.
Podfather.
So Adam Curry is the Podfather. One-time MTV VJ back at the beginning. Always innovating.
Just so Johnny knows, MTV played videos at one point in time.
Is that what that was? I thought it was just a channel for Jersey Shore.
It was more than the Hills. Anyhow,
Even.
at minute 20, and he repeated this sort of theme throughout, and he sort of talked a little bit about what podcasting's future could be, or at least what the opportunity is right now in podcasting. And so this is from the New Media Show from last week. Clip runs 2 minutes, and it is worth taking notes.
What I feel right now is the big opportunity, which I'm actually working on myself. Local markets, they've been completely ignored by radio. Even Z100 in New York, where I worked for many years,
Right.
it's Elvis Duran in the morning, but he's in 15 markets. And yeah, you'll hear a localized Z100 New York jingle, but that doesn't mean that he has to do more generalized stuff. Well, I mean, New York does still have some New York newspapers, but even they cater more now towards the entire country or the entire world, like the New York Post. And the New York Times certainly is really no longer a local New York newspaper. Facebook has sucked up all the local advertising from any type of publication in any local market. So I feel that at this point, there's a tremendous opportunity to create podcasts based upon very hyper local geographical location. In fact, I'm going to be doing one for Fredericksburg right here. It's 11,500 people. There's a lot of interesting people here. There's certainly a lot of money in Fredericksburg. And we have one newspaper that comes out once a week, and it's very politically slanted. And people, they have no local voice. It's such an obvious hole in the market. You could turn a 747 around in it. So, and that's globally. That's what radio used to do. Radio was local. That's the opportunity I see. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen. That I think we'll see in the next couple of years, we'll see many hyper-localized podcasts that will be thriving because local communities will support it. So, it seems like we can get back to that, and that's a big opportunity. Nothing is new. It's all been done before. It's just a cycle, and we're coming around.
That was
There you have it.
incredible. That was a great clip.
That was
Yeah,
a
it
great
was.
clip.
It really was.
It's something really similar to what we talk about a lot in this show, which is there's the riches and the niches, but we don't necessarily talk about it to a local geographical area. We talk about it a local topic or industry or business or something like that can be spread out over the country. However, I think it's a huge, I totally agree with Adam, a huge hole that can be filled is making the Fort Worth podcast, the whatever
right.
neighborhood David is in Boston podcast like that. There's such an opportunity for that. And for people listening, you can do that very easily. The one thing I wonder about is it's a huge time commitment because you want it to be on par with something like a newspaper, which would be daily. So you're talking about a daily show, daily guests. That's a huge content calendar that you have to fill, which means less time for high-end production, probably a lot less editing. It's going to be kind of just hit record, get it done, put it out type of thing. Very minimal post-production sound design, unless you're running it like a radio station, which is probably what Jack was going to say. But yeah, I think ultimately it's a great idea.
Let me push back on you there, Johnny. I don't think it has to be a daily show. It could be a weekly show where
Okay.
you almost like, think about like, local public access television back in the day where they would have maybe the round table with the town councilman or the newsmaker of the week or whatever it is. But I feel like it could be once a week or, twice a month or whatever it is. And I feel like you could make it a really well-produced show. You may not have enough content in small town USA or Canada to do a show every day, but I bet you could do something at least once a week. And if it became appointment listening for the residents of your town, it could really take off.
I agree with Jag. I rescind my point.
Well, and also like think about the different types of communities. So I'm thinking about, I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We have festival seasons. So the fall becomes a time when we're having a lot of events. We go right into Mardi Gras season, and then things taper off in the summer because we're all dying from the heat. So you can follow the seasonal rhythms of that actual community. And it also kind of shows that you know a little bit about, you're on the inside when you're tracking the things that are going on in the community.
Does anybody actually do anything local or have a podcast that is local? Jag.
That's my start.
It seems like that's up Jag's alley.
Semi-local. So I do a podcast for one of the local chambers of commerce here in suburban Detroit, the town of Royal Oak. So I'm as a member of the Royal Oak Chamber of Commerce, we interview 2 chambers every month. We release it bi-weekly. It's just a 20-minute podcast where we learn about the person and their business, and the chamber markets that podcast to the members of, hey, get to know this new chamber member. They own a barbershop, a food restaurant, whatever it is. And it's a good way to connect with folks. It's a great selling point for the membership coordinator when someone's thinking about joining the chamber and they come talk to her. She says, well, come on and I'll give you John's email and we'll get on this podcast, and you can introduce yourself to the whole community. So I see value in that as well.
I do have a show called The Boston Podcast, which is kind of on semi-hiatus, but and for a while it was a daily podcast, 5 days a week. And it was decent, but it was just a little too ambitious.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a grind to try to get something up, and then if you're stuck for a guest, sometimes you try to recycle or repackage something. So I'm delighted to hear that there's a movement towards this, because I always thought it made sense. That was my original vision when I started the Boston Podcast Network. But it's tricky because you also, we don't want to limit ourselves necessarily. If someone comes to us from outside of market and wants to produce it, technology allows us to do that. And technology allows podcasts to be national hits and not just local hits. But man, there's like, I don't know what the best Boston podcast is. It's not necessarily the Boston Podcast.
Because you plugged that, you can't plug past tens now this time, Dave.
Dang it, Jag! I was gonna have a great setup. I was gonna say,
we still got 30 minutes.
David, where do you put your passions now?
Just for the record, you guys brought up the fact that I have a podcast called
Past Tens, a top 10 time machine
that I do enjoy.
And that is a benchmark of this show, Dave's plug of the Past Tense podcast.
Yes.
Our raving fans are waiting for the reference. Come on.
If they had minute 35 in the pool.
Ultimately, I'm glad that Adam has found something like that to be passionate about. Like he's going to do the Fredericksburg podcast, because Matt Kundle, you probably know more, but it seems like podcasting 2.0 has kind of fallen off and hasn't really taken the leap that Adam was hoping it was going to be.
I think that's about right. I don't, it's just hard to get Apple and Spotify to jump on board. They are starting to include things, but they're not including it for the betterment of podcasting. They're doing it probably for their own, legal parts. That's why transcriptions are beginning to show up. I think the one thing I would love to see in apps is a geolocal tag of some sort to say, this podcast serves Boston, this podcast serves Detroit, this podcast serves Baton Rouge. What if I could go in and search all the podcasts for Dallas, Fort Worth, or just Fort Worth, or just Dallas?
YouTube has it.
Wow. Well, there you go. Right. And we can put the tag in, but are the apps going to be able to pick that up? Right. I think the other tag I would really like is live. So this podcast right now, we're doing it live. It would be nice if on some apps it showed up, hey, these people are live right now. You can listen to it.
Yeah.
That would be good. And can we just give props to Rob Greenlee he has for years been really just being a great advocate and ambassador for the idea of local podcasting. In fact, I was on a panel that he hosted and moderated in Podcast Movement way back in the day, talking about local podcasting. So he has been stalwart on just saying this is a great opportunity, pointing out the opportunity for years and years and years.
I'll share this one. And I think I accidentally shared it over Jag when he was talking earlier on. And this is CityCast, which appears in a number of cities across America. and it's smart daily local news, podcasts, and newsletters to make you a more curious citizen. I don't know if this is a form of citizen journalism or if it's just, it's journalism overall, but it's in all the kitschy cities like Boise and Austin.
It reminds me of the Locked On series where they have the Locked On insert sports teams. Have you guys heard of that?
Absolutely.
Locked On was a major sponsor of Podcast Movement this year, Johnny, and they have become such a player in the space by employing a podcaster for all 4 major sports, every single team, and they're expanding and beyond that.
And I think they're daily shows. It's amazing.
Even in the off season, it's at least 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It's incredible what they've done. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, hopefully CityCast can be the next Locked On, because I think that's a fantastic idea, especially to give sort of the distribution, because a lot of people, like I know just in my time doing this in Fort Worth, I've come across at least 3 or 4 shows where they wanted to do sort of like the what's happening in Fort Worth kind of show. And each of them would take a sort of a different angle, but it's hard. It's really hard to grow an audience in a city specific area. So hopefully something like CityCast can help people sort of get the eyeballs on there as they get going.
Let's at the evergreen comment is it's hard to build an audience. Full stop. That's
Yeah.
Content is king.
My plug down at the bottom of the screen there.
Dave does it on audio. Matt
we
does it
already
on
have
visual.
somebody who plugs their own show. You can't plug your show too.
I already Matt's tagline. Mine is a loving counterpoint. David gets the top 10, and then Matt has already interviewed them some extenuated time ago.
Yeah, to stick the graphic on the screen is useless for our podcast audience listening. Who I put up a graphic saying Brian Goldmark from Locked On appeared on the Sound Off podcast last year, and he did give away a lot of the secret sauce to how it's all done. So they will contract out their creators. So the Packers, there's one Packers podcast, there's one Cowboys, one Winnipeg Jets, one whatever sports team, and they are required to do a piece of content 5 days a week and put it in, and then they fill it up with our favorite, which are mid-rolls and the ads. And it's competition against sports radio in your local market. So at some point, a sports station in Boston at 98.5 is going to stop talking about the Patriots. They're going to talk about the Red Sox, but I want to listen to the Patriots. I want to talk about the Patriots.
Nobody does this.
I don't know why. Nobody wants to talk about the Patriots right now, but
Well, and that also moves a lot with the times too, because I mean, I see all of these cringe Instagram posts of you got one guy wearing a Dodgers baseball hat, but he's also wearing a Red Sox, or he's wearing a Patriots football jersey. So you have these sort of transplants all over the place where they might live in Boston, but they're Dodgers fans, but then they follow the Celtics. And then, so they don't care about listening to the Patriots. They want to just get their team's fix being in that area. And then that expands across the country as well for people that leave those markets as well.
And they want to listen when they want, which you can't do on the radio.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine.
Yes, sir.
You want to set us up here?
I sure do. Well, and it is sort of a nice segue talking about local, because we do have a very localized audience for the next show that I'm going to be talking about. And that is Living Lovett. And it is the podcast from the Chief Engagement Officer at the Lovett School in Atlanta, Georgia. And the clip that I have brought features the Lovett School alum, Mary Louise Kelly. And if you recognize that name, it's because she is the host of NPR's All Things Considered, the afternoon newscast. She graduated, she went all the way through Lovett from kindergarten all the way through high school. And we got to talk to her on the Living Lovett podcast. And I want to talk about the opportunity. So this is a show that is talking to the current families of the Lovett School. But what we found is that so many people that are prospective families or prospective employees of the Lovett School, people who are considering sending their kids to Lovett, they are in turn listening to the podcast. So this was a great chance to feature an alum and get some really high quality discussion as well. So you're not going to hear my voice. It's going to be host Jessica Sant talking to Mary Louise Kelly.
You've interviewed some of the most powerful people on the planet, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear how you prepare for those conversations and what insight you can offer to kids about preparation in general, what that looks like.
If I'm going into a big interview, the preparation It sounds funny to say, but the preparation has started years in advance. This summer, for example, I sat down with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and he gave me 45 minutes. So that's enough time to go deep on a number of things. And the preparation for that is like all the interviews that I've done over years. It's all of the times that I've traveled to the Middle East or Asia or wherever and talked to real people. I think about an interview like that of trying to figure out exactly what it is I want to know, exactly how to frame a question to get at what I want to know, to be very prepared with pushback is what we call it. But if someone starts to go down their prepared talking points, to steer them back to what it is I actually want to know. I try to, for a big interview, I've read everything they've said about something and kept up with the news, obviously, but I'm also trying just to get real voices to put to them. So, for example, interviewing the Secretary of State about Russia and Ukraine.
So I really took from this was really a moment in the interview that I really just drew upon, because here we have Mary Louise Kelly, who is at one of the top news organizations in the United States. And she was saying that really all of the big interviews that she's doing is a culmination of years and years of doing smaller interviews, is that now she knows how to go into talking to the Secretary of State because she's done decades of interviews. And I thought that was such a podcasty kind of approach to her work, is that when we're doing podcasts, if you're putting out content on a regular basis, all of the things that you're doing for your show, all of the interviews, all the prep work, that is preparing you to develop your craft into the kind of podcaster and the kind of interviewer to create the kind of show that you want to do. There is a culminating effect to all of these little pieces of the podcast. I also want to just point out that Mary Louise Kelly is an extremely busy person, an extremely busy professional, and having the podcast provided a sort of a reason for her to talk to the other people of the Lovett School. It gave us a reason to invite her to come and talk to the families. It gave a point of connection for everybody who's in the school. So I just really saw so many wins that only come from podcasting in this particular interview. And I thought this clip really sort of captured something there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's stuff that I tell people who are looking to start podcasts all the time. They don't tend to think about, oh, I actually have to become a host. I have to become interesting. I have to become entertaining. And then I'll tell them that. I'll be like, you're taking on a part-time job here. You're becoming a content creator, for lack of a better term. And then they'll ask, well, how do I do that well? What they're really asking is, how do I do that really well right away? And I say the only way that you can do it is by just putting interviews together, recording yourself in front of the mic and getting reps of just talking. At first, maybe it's to nobody, and then talking to small interviews. And then that, like she said in the clip, that eventually builds up to the really, really big interview. And there's one other thing I wanted to point out, Catherine, is just how amazing technology is, because I can imagine from that clip that she was not recording with a microphone and that you used,
that is correct,
the beautiful technology of AI to save her and to make her actually audible, which is surprising because someone who works on a news show doesn't have at least
you'd think
a beautiful blue Yeti sitting on their desk.
In her defense, she was visiting her mom, and she lives in Washington, D.C. She was visiting her mom in Atlanta, and she was sitting in a beautiful sunroom that was all tile.
Oh, no.
Talking into her phone. So I am thankful for the audio that I have, and I tried to bring it to the best of the quality that I could. But really, that's a testament to what she was saying is really the compelling part. Thanks for pointing that out, Johnny.
Johnny, do you have your ear trained to the point where you know when something like Adobe or Studio Sound has been inflicted upon some audio?
I like to think that my ears are my best feature, so yes.
We can't even see them. They're covered by headphones right now.
Yeah. You see, I know when it sounds like Zoom. I know, oh, that was done on Zoom. I'm listening to a podcast with Zoom. Oh, it's the Boston Podcast Network. Okay, yeah, I get it now.
Oh my God!
Oh,
wow!
So, I'm joking. I know.
No, but to Johnny and Matt's point,
wait. I just want to say, David does tidy it up nicely.
Okay.
I was going to say there is a certain sound to Adobe Studio Sound or to Descript Studio Sound. You can, that's why I appreciate the folks in this group teaching me. You've got to back it off from the normal 100% or so.
I did.
Oof. I mean, and it's going to sound still a heck of a lot better than I'm sure what Catherine got for starters. But again, it goes back to the worse the quality of the audio, the better the content needs to be. And obviously that's phenomenal content talking to somebody like that. So people will put up with audio that's not perfect because the content's so good.
Thank you, Jag, for turning it back to the positive, the content, which is why I brought.
Well,
that
it's great for the audience too, Catherine, for the Love It audience too, because I mean, we all feel nostalgic about our alma maters, whether it's high school or college, and say one of us makes it big one day, and you get invited to go back on to your college or high school podcast. Like that's a really great. It's really great for the audience to be like, oh, wow, I had no idea we had this famous, amazing alumni, and look at how gracious she was to come back and to just join our little community that we have in Atlanta. So it's a testament to doing something like that. Again, hyper niche.
It was a cool clip that you chose for a couple of reasons, because good clip and like you said, relevant to podcasters. Some podcasters might take that the wrong way. And by that, I mean this. What she said was, well, that interview, I had been preparing 3 years for it because I've been in and around these circles and read up on this and read up on that. Now, your average podcaster might hear that and go, well, what the heck am I going to do? I'm just starting out and I'm going to interview this guy that owns, a car dealership down the road. But the other way to sort of take that is I took it as she's very comfortable and in her knowledge in this whole world. And so she's not going to be wed to a series of questions that she's carefully prepared for this particular purpose this
Great
day.
point.
And
point.
that I think is what any podcaster should know is Mark Maron, comedian who's a zillion downloads on his podcast. He said he learns enough to not be embarrassed when he brings something up with the person, but don't over prepare to the extent that you sound like a robot asking questions. Get comfortable and then be curious. Be curious during the interview, and that will make for a better show.
And don't be afraid to go off script if you are, which is essentially what you're saying, David. Like don't be afraid to if something pops into your head, you can ask it, and if it sucks, you can edit it out later.
Exactly.
And to both your points, anything you can record, you can make better.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I think a lot of people do not do, and I'm thinking of the client you mentioned, Johnny, where, oh, how do I get good now? I think the onus is on the performer to go back and listen to the show and listen to themselves again and again. I mean, listen, I got to a point where it's just like I took my show and I was like, okay, I'm done. But I should be listening back to those and doing a self-check and listening as you would expect a listener to listen to the show. But so many people do not do that. I don't know what the number is. I think it'd be great to get a poll question on that across the industry. And I don't think Sounds Profitable or Edison or anybody's going to be doing that because it seems like a silly question. I'm not sure what's in it for anybody. But I would love to know, do you listen back to your own show to hear how it sounds or sounded?
You absolutely should. Yeah. And I have some people I work with that refuse. I hate the sound of my own voice. No, I don't want to know. Well, I mean, how are you going to get better? And the podcast that I appear on, I notice there are some I look forward to listening back to, and there are others I don't. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen back to that. So what does that tell me about that one that I don't want to listen back to? That maybe I could be doing something better in that podcast.
That's the one you got to be listening back to. And, I do love that almost every creative form, whether it's writing, whether it is podcasting, video, live stream. I've heard live streamers say something to this effect, which is if you aren't cringing at the early ones, if you aren't cringing for 2 or 3 years ago, then you might be stuck. And so that it's kind of even though none of us want to experience the cringe, it is good to have that cringe feeling because it shows you the growth that you've had from that time that you were to where you are now.
I tell clients all the time, that if I said I don't have a single client that gets to episode 10 that likes how episode number 1 sounded or looked.
You want to bury it, but you did it. That's the thing. But you did it.
I've had some clients archive their first 25 episodes and start with 30 when they started to get good.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. Take the cringe, because the worse the cringe, the more you're going to want to correct it the next time around. Like, there's no way I'm going to do that again.
Just by listening to yourself and disliking what you hear is a great way to change what you don't like, and it will start to shape about who you want to become.
Everybody says that, oh, I hate the sound of my own voice. Well, you're asking a lot of other people to listen to your voice. You better get used to listening to it yourself.
Well, I mean, you can just tell, well, you had 150 downloads. So those people didn't hate the sound of your voice. Why are you the only one? Why is that? Okay, we sit here with. I guess we have time for another one. David submitted.
Sure. Really, really simple. It's a podcast that probably a lot of people have heard because it's we're doing a big service for NPR today, but it's NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me. And it's a podcast that, it's the weekly news quiz podcast, which is kind of what it sounds like. Interesting panelists. And my favorite part of the show is when they do the limericks. And there's a lesson here, but they're funny. So, Matt, go ahead and roll it, but feel free to stop after like one limerick or whatever.
I cut it down, and I thought we would get through to 2 limericks.
2 limericks, okay, good.
If you want to cut it, just message me and say, okay, I'm good. I'm done with this.
Well, welcome to the show, Kevin. Bill Curtis is going to read you 3 news-related limericks with a last word or phrase missing from each. If you can fill in that last word or phrase correctly in 2 of the limericks, you will be a winner. You ready to play?
Yes, sir.
All right, here is your first limerick.
Against humans, a grudge I am nursing. 'Cause of you, all my monkey dates worsen. Ape ladies won't swipe for a Todd, Chad, or Mike. I'm alone 'cause I look like a...
person.
Yes, a person. Very good.
Wow.
A monkey at a zoo in China has been single for 19 years because he looks too much like a person. Because as any person who's tried to get with a monkey knows, they are just not interested in us. Zookeepers say a monkey's person-like face has kept females from pairing with him. When you look at the pictures, it's true. He doesn't just look like a person. He looks like a person that hasn't gotten laid in 19 years.
Sad monkey. How do they know that's why?
Well, they think that's... Obviously, the monkey is unsuccessful. They know this, and they think it's because it looks too much like a person.
Well, that's just a wild guess.
Well, if you see a picture of this monkey, and we have looked at a picture...
He's got like a tie and a suit coat on? Yeah, it's just a silly idea. And I'm sure he doesn't look that much like a human.
No,
anyway.
he does. I've seen his picture, and he's got it, okay?
Really?
Yeah.
He looks like... What person does he look like?
He looks sort of like a small Brad Pitt.
Kevin, here is your next limerick.
The old family card game that you know gets political when red or blue show. Neutrality warrants some purple or orange. We've made a nonpartisan
Uno.
Yes, very good.
I've never heard of that game, and you got it.
The new edition of the family card game Uno does not include red or blue cards, and Mattel says it's to help families avoid political disagreements.
Oh, my heavens.
Seriously, Mom? Draw 4 again. You're so part of the Uno %. It's weird, though. They don't want to be political, but the game still forces players to learn Spanish. Mattel says the nonpartisan version will bring families together because, quote, without red or blue cards, the focus can stay on the game.
That is so ridiculous.
Well...
Are there families that can't go to the ocean?
Because it's blue?
Yeah, or on a beautiful day, they're like, don't look at the sky, we're Republicans. It's absurd.
Don't eat that apple, it's red, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. You know what?
What, Paula?
Maybe that monkey is the one who had that Uno idea, and that's why it's not having sex.
Dumb idea.
So, always entertaining clip. Paula Poundstone, I think, won the episode there as the panelist. But so why would I bring this up? I mean, not many among us have the ability to have like 3 comedians on a panel in this professionally produced podcast, but we can be clever and we can come up with little segments that get our guests out of their comfort zone and God forbid, have some fun because a lot of times, even if you get a serious guest like a politician or an executive, they'll love playing a game. Now, trivia, I think, is kind of a hit or miss kind of thing. If you there are some people that just aren't going to be into like trivia, but that limerick game that they play is an example of something you can do that no one needs any prep for. And if they're sort of game and their spirit and what they do on that show is they'll actually give the person hints. So I'm always looking for any kind of device to make things a little bit different. And also, I mean, I don't know about you as a listener, I want to play along. Anything the listener like gets to play along at home with, it's immediately you're ingraining yourself with that listener, and that listener is like, all right, come on, give me the next one. What's the next one? I want to know.
They feel like they're part of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think another thing that was an unintentional takeaway from this, Dave, was the aspect of the live call-in. I think is another way that you can differentiate yourself as a podcast. So it reminded me of this one show that I just found and started listening to from the Dave Ramsey Network. It's called the Dr. John Deloney Show or Deloney Show.
Yeah.
Where the entire show is just, I think he's a psychologist or he's something, but he's a certified advice giver. And the whole show is people calling in with these, deep problems that they're having. And he walks them through it and he helps them kind of work through the problems that they're having in their lives or their marriages or whatever it might be. And not a lot of shows do that. A lot of the shows that we're seeing now are either the solo person giving their expert thoughts on topic X, or it's interview between person A and person B. And it's just a different way to one, you get your guests or you get your audience to call in, people that are fans of the show, again, getting them ingrained and feeling like they're part of the show. And then it's just another way to differentiate yourself from the crowd.
You brought up a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, and it reminded me of, there's a comedian that does a podcast with other comedians, and part of his thing is word association game. He'll have like maybe just 12 words and say, okay, let's play. And it's always interesting because you never know what people are going to say. It's like dog, food or whatever, so that wasn't a good example.
Well, and even it's funny. So Paula Pounds, the sort of one of the running jokes of that of wait, don't tell me, is Paula Pounds. I know there's a word for it, but she basically plays like sort of the, not quite the curmudgeon, but she's sort of the
agitator,
the straight man. Yeah. She's always almost the naysayer of like, who did this study? Who funded this study? That's her kind of her famous line there. So she's always like a good counter punch to everybody else on the show there. So everybody has their role. And Bill Curtis has never heard of the game Uno? Come on.
Weird.
That was weird.
But you're right.
I've never heard of Bill Curtis or Paula Poundstone, so I have heard of Uno.
I mean, but you better bring up a good point about them knowing their roles, Catherine, because left in different hands, that might not be as entertaining. Right. Like, you do a funny limerick, the guest either gets it wrong or right, and then here you go, panel comment for 1.5 minutes, right? And Paula got a lot of good lines in there, but they knew when to get in and knew when to get out. So that's
timing. Yeah.
It has the feel of really, really old time radio.
Yeah.
Almost like
radio, I think, right?
Yeah. Like 1950s.
But there's a vaudevillian kind of quality to it. Oh, yeah. Yes, you're correct. Yeah. Well, I guess that just about does it. International Podcast Day continues for whatever time is left in your time zone. How will you guys be spending the rest of it?
I'll be watching my adopted Detroit Lions.
That's right. He
adopts the Lions right when they get good and the Patriots get shitty.
Interesting.
Guilty.
There's something in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Happy International Podcast Day. We'll go around the table. This time we will go counterclockwise. We will start in Detroit and say goodbye.
Goodbye from the home of the Lions and Tigers. Oh my, John Gay, Jagged Detroit Podcasts.
As we say in Boston, see you later from pod617.com, the Boston Podcast Network. I'm Dave. Thanks.
Johnny.
Dallas. Hello, Dallas. Hello, Dallas.
Fort Worth.
Hello, Dallas, Fort Worth.
All right. I'm Johnny in Dallas, Fort Worth. Thank you for tuning in. Please remember to follow the show, subscribe on YouTube, follow all of us on Twitter, and do not hesitate to reach out to any of us online if you have a podcasting question.
There is still time to send out your happy International Podcast Day correspondence. I suggest that you all do that. My name is Catherine. I'd love to see you on Twitter at Hello Catherine O.
Matt Kundle, the Sound Off Media Network. The Sound Off Media Company from the Sound Off Podcast Network in Winnipeg, Canada, where I cannot start a geolocal podcast about Winnipeg for fear that it will get stabbed.
Thanks for listening to the podcast Super Friends. For a transcript of the show or to connect with the Super Friends, go to the show notes of this episode or go to soundoff.network.